We're here for the stories you don't hear at conferences. You know, the ones that start with, "You won't believe what happened on this project."
We like to say between two cones is the snack break between strategy sessions, where leaders get real about what's working and what's still a work in progress. So today, we're talking about resilience, not the Pinterest version, but the kind that keeps you steady when the wind won't stop blowing.
And resilience has really become a central theme in transportation. We hear a lot about resilience of bridges and roadways and tarmacs, but we also hear about resilience in the workforce and in leadership. And the ability to anticipate, adapt, and recover is no longer an option for transportation. A recent industry forum summed it up. Resilient agencies don't just build stronger roads. They build smarter teams, smarter processes, and they use data in a smarter way. That's leadership in motion. The Vermont Agency of Transportation is in its third year of strategic workforce management, and the results are really inspiring. Supervisors are changing the way they lead.
Christine Hetzel, our guest here, she's a powerhouse in transportation workforce planning, so part strategist, part scientist, and full-time problem solver at the Vermont Agency of Transportation. She doesn't just talk about workforce management, she builds it, tests it, makes it actually work.
And one of the things that I like best about being able to talk with Christine today is that she not only looks for new ideas and innovations, she loves to learn from other people's new ideas and innovations. And she knows how to take what she hears and adapt it and make it work in her organization. So we're really fortunate to have this time to learn from her and hear from her today. And before we have Christine start telling us her story, I just want to share a couple of things. First, Christine has a master's in organizational leadership, and she's a certified ProSci change manager. That in and of itself is very impressive. On top of that, she's also a Gallup strength coach. And what that means is that she has real life experience to do more than just talk about the theory. She can really tell us what it's like in the trenches, on the roads, in the middle of a rainstorm, or whatever else might be happening along the way. So we're really pleased to have you here. I asked Christine before we got started what she was drawn to with transportation, because, unlike some of our future guests, she didn't grow up saying, "I'm going to be a civil engineer and design roads."
Did not.
And Christine shared that she was able to work with the Agency of Transportation, and what really drew her was the culture of the agency. People were getting things done, and they were letting people and goods keep moving across the state of Vermont. So, Christine, it's great to have you here, and we're excited to hear your story.
I'm excited to be here. Great. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about change, and, we've all heard the quote that change is inevitable and growth is optional from our leadership expert, John Maxwell. But it really is true. We live in this world of constant change that I don't think anybody of a certain age, and I am past the certain age, I think, we just didn't anticipate this kind of pace and rigor of change, whether it's economical or political change right now, social change, technology, AI. We need to continue to refine our tools. Mm-hmm. What we were doing 5 years ago, it just doesn't work anymore. And our employees have different expectations. The employee that came into the Agency of Transportation 25 years ago had a much different assessment of whether the organization was going to meet their needs or not, as it does now. And so I think that when you look at technology and AI and how it's changed how we research, how we process information, even how we communicate with each other, middle managers, if they aren't continue to evolve and develop, they're kind of being left behind. And worst case, their teams are being left behind. So I'm really excited to talk about this concept of middle management. And I just want to share up front the lessons that I'm going to be talking about and tools that I challenge myself to use on a daily basis, they affect all levels of the organization. So we're going to focus on middle managers, but it isn't just middle managers. This really affects all people in an organization. So because it's really about leadership and influence. And I think our culture thinks, oh, if you're an executive, then you have all the leadership and influence and everybody else in the organization is just following. Well, we know that that's not true, right? In some cases, in some organizations, our leadership actually has less influence than the people that are there every single day because they're not in front of people every minute of every day. So, if you think about it, I was raised in a large family. And so the time I spent with my siblings or at work, the time I spend with my peers it's such a greater volume of time than the time I spent with my parents or that I would spend with executive leadership. So it doesn't matter which lane you're in terms of your career. We all have a tremendous amount of influence that we can impart on the people around us, whether we're doing it purposefully or we're just flying by the seat of our pants. The influence is happening, whether we are strategic about it or not. So I kind of like to lay out the analogy for today. Since it's transportation, let's talk about roads. And so let's think about a 3-lane interstate, or depending on where you live, some people call it a highway, some people call it a freeway, some people call it an interstate. So 3 lanes going in the same direction. You have that right lane, and we can think of that as the line stack lane. We can think of that as the onboarding, offboarding lane. And then you have this middle lane that we're focusing on today. It's just kind of like that supervisor, middle manager level individual. And then you have the left-hand lane. And let's think about that just for the purposes of today as the executive lane. So, or the fast lane, however you want to call it. So we all sit in these different lanes. And so I've had the opportunity, I'm sure many of our listeners today have had the opportunity to kind of drive in each of these lanes. And I think for those of us that have had that privilege to work as an individual contributor, work in this middle management lane, and serve as an executive, we realize just how much influence every lane has on each other and just the currents that get knocked in and out of these lanes based on what the people are doing next to you. So I want to focus today on resilience and driving in the middle lane when the wind is blowing. And so any comments or questions about that before I just kind of dive into some practical tips? What have been your experiences in the different lanes? I know you've had a very stellar career. Any thoughts on have a preference on your lane? Or
So I started as a clerk typist, fresh out of college, and I was typing documents. That was the beginning of my career. And then in transportation, I went from human resources and the middle management level up through the executive level. So I did get to spend a little time in a few lanes. And, one of the things I noticed is that when I was if we stay with the lane idea, when I was in the middle management, I felt like I had a better view of the road. I could see the exits that were coming. I could see what was coming, the inbound traffic. I could see who was going fast in the left-hand lane. And so I felt like I had a better view of what the big picture might be. Mm-hmm. But I also feel like because there was so much coming in, I was much more focused on exactly in my lane and who might be getting in front of me or behind me, and I didn't want to hit anyone, right? And so while I felt like I had a better feel for what was really happening in the entire agency, I didn't feel like I had as much opportunity to do something about it. And when I was in the fast lane, I missed details because I was moving. and I was aware of the oncoming traffic more on the other side. And I wasn't as aware of what was coming in and what was leaving. And so I think that while I had more opportunity to encourage and make changes or influence direction, I didn't have the same view of what was really happening in the organization. And so I gave up some of that connection in order to be able to be at the executive level. And that to me, gosh, I mean, if I had to make a preference, I don't know.
Yeah, they all have their strengths and they all have their challenges.
Absolutely.
And I think they all have the opportunity for this influence. It's just at a different level, right? Because even as a middle manager, you're definitely providing a lot of influence over the team. And we do have this opportunity to have tremendous impact on people. It's just at a different level. And in this right-hand lane, again, I think line staff or individual contributors feel like, oh, I don't have any influence and power. And that's just not true. They really, really do. And I think a good manager draws that out and leaves space so that everyone has an opportunity to lead. Like that's one of the greatest gifts I learned with the Gallup Strengths coaching and training and really helping people to exercise their strengths. Every single individual has value that nobody else can bring to that team. So I thought it was really funny when you were talking about your view and being in the different lanes. My husband and I bought a motorhome about a year ago. And so, I mean, I'm a pretty brave driver. I mean, I grew up on a farm. So, I mean, I grew up driving tractors when I was probably 5 or 6 years old and snowmobiles and all the things. But we bought this massive motorhome. It's like 38 feet. It's over 12 feet tall. It's a bus. And we were standing on the outside of it thinking, like, we're actually going to drive this across the country. We live in Vermont. We bought it in Texas. We flew out to purchase it and then just got in the thing and we're like, okay, let's figure out how to drive this monstrosity home. But I find it really interesting. My husband likes a different lane than I do. So when he's driving, he likes the right-hand lane. And he likes this, like, it's slower speed. He has, usually like a breakdown lane if he needs it. And thank goodness we've never needed it. But he is kind of that's his favorite lane to drive in. And I like the middle lane, which is why I think it's so interesting that we're talking about driving in the middle lane today, because I like to see both sides. And I feel like as the individual contributor, there's too much traffic like going on and off. And I think sometimes that's how our individual contributors feel. Like there's so much change, just they're bombarded with it all day long and they have a lot of change exhaustion. I like the middle lane. I don't like fast lane because that is just too difficult to maintain this high speed. And to be honest, I would say I've actually felt that in my career too. I think for many people, executive leadership is a season because it's exhausting and it takes a tremendous toll. And that middle lane for myself has been where, like, this is where I really want to sunset. I want to sunset in this lane. And that's where I like to drive my motorhome. I park myself in the middle lane and all the little, race cars can fly by me and all the people coming in and off can kind of fly by me. And I'm kind of blown a little bit here and there if someone's really creating a lot of dust. But otherwise, I find like it's this really steady place to be that can get me where I want to go and can be done in a really fun and enjoyable way.
Okay, Trish, what's your favorite lane?
What do you think?
Well, where I'm going, we don't need lanes. No.
Oh, all right. You're in a whole new lane. Color me surprised. Surprise.
Back to the future. No, I really like a lot of what you guys said. I think really the base of everyone's responsible for the culture that we're creating, no matter what lane you're in, right? The safety of the roadway is dependent on slow, middle, and fast lane all following, in whatever the constraints are of that road, right? The speed limit, making sure there's nothing on the road that is going to cause hiccups in the other lanes. And that goes both ways, from the left lane to the right lane to everybody in the middle. I think it's really an important piece that everybody comes together to make the road safe, whether you're talking about going really fast or going really slow. Both of those can contribute both to the positive side of where we're going and the pitfalls. So, yeah, I think the cohesiveness of leaving space for everybody and their individual speed, and like in careers as well. I love this metaphor. It's fun, right? Like talking about how we move through life and careers and transportation in the same way that we drive on the roads in real life. I like the slow lane. I drive like an old lady. Drives my husband nuts. Like I am the one that is way too slow. When I first moved to the big city, I had never been on highways as crazy or big before, as I'm near Austin, Texas, and the roads here are nuts. And I was so afraid of the highway that I would drive on the frontage road everywhere because it was terrifying to get on and off, right? It took me like a year of driving on the frontage road everywhere before I could get on the highway.
Well, we're glad that you feel safe on the highway now. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's get practical, right? We want our audience to walk away today with some tools on how to build resiliency. I think this is, again, it's relevant in every lane that we're talking about. And so I have 5 tips, 5 suggestions that I'm challenging myself on. So I'm not sharing this as, hey, I'm the resident expert and this is how you fix, all the chaos of change in your work and your home. We're all, I think we're all on a journey together. We're all just trying to practice tools and tips. This is an area of resilience that I do a lot of research in. It's the foundation of programming in Vermont, of the leadership training that we do, supervisor training. And so I'm going to just ask folks, just kind of as we go through these tips, assess yourself, what's maybe working for you, or what's kind of sticking out as, that's kind of a gap. There's a challenge that I have. This is something maybe I need to set a goal on, or, hey, this is something that I'm doing really well. I want to keep doing that. I want to protect that. I want to celebrate that. So the first point is to put your own oxygen mask on first. So this is a challenge. So just think about, like, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about these changes that are happening? And this is for work or for home, transportation industry. How are you showing up for your team? Are you happy with the way in which, and comfortable and effective in the way in which you're showing up for your team? And this concept of putting the oxygen mask on is really wide, right? We've all heard this before, but really this talks about, as a leader, your physical investment in yourself, your emotional investment in yourself, spiritual investment. Let's unpack this a little bit. So if we're under a lot of pressure and stress, and change is stressful, let's just call it out there and agree, unless the change is our idea and something we're really driven to do, change that's hoisted upon us can be really challenging. And I think sometimes we really overlook the investment we need to make in our own health. And that's really tough, because when you're working a lot of hours and you're really stressed out, myself included, I can have some really bad habits, ways in which I can cope that aren't really going to help the situation. So, ask yourself, did you get your workout in today? How's your nutrition level doing? Did you have a good night's sleep last night? And these things are so boring, right? But our bodies are like a machine, and they need to be tuned up, and they need to be invested in and taken care of. And I know in so many of these different lanes, I'm skipping lunch, I'm eating at my desk, I'm not getting fresh air, I'm not getting any light. None of these things, I kid myself into thinking that, oh, I'm working so hard, I don't have time to take care of myself. And all I'm doing is making myself a less effective leader, right? Like when I take the time. Go ahead, Trish. Go ahead, Trish.
I was just going to say, that's exactly when you're in the fast lane and in the left lane, you're setting that example and that pace for everybody in the middle and the slow lane. And if you aren't taking a lunch and you aren't prioritizing your family and letting people be humans and have grace for themselves, then they're going to follow your example, and it changes everybody's lane, right? So yeah. I think that's really powerful that you said that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at so many of, the great leaders in business or in politics or in any area, they all have physical regimens. Mm-hmm. They manage their nutrition. They manage the way they process their emotions. They have tools to self-regulate. Many of them have spiritual investment in their life, whatever that means to the individual. There's lots of ways to connect and to have a grander purpose than just today. I think those are all really important points. And before we move on, the last point I want to make on this is for those of us that really want to be servant leaders, this one is tough because we don't want to land ourselves in me land. We don't feel satisfied living in me land. We want to live in us land or in you land. And again, I think we're fooling ourselves. If we don't take good care of ourselves, we don't have the capacity to take care of others. So when you're, again, in the transportation thing, when you're sitting in the plane and they're telling you to put your oxygen mask on, it's so that you then have the ability to help your row mates and to help the other people around you. If you're gasping for oxygen and passing out and falling over, now you're a barrier. You're of no use to anybody. So oxygen mask on. Right, number 2, here we go, which was really a spinoff of what you were talking about before, and that's leading with purpose and passion. And so what values do I want to model as a leader? So when we think about our work, what really fuels us? What energizes us? In transportation, right? We're using fuel. That's moving things forward. How does the purpose and the passion about what I'm doing fuel my energy and keep me moving in the right direction? And I think that this is really important when we're talking about driving in this middle lane, because again, we're talking a little bit about change that's maybe being put upon us, and how do we really focus in on, okay, how am I staying in my lane? Mm-hmm. How do I maintain my speed? How do I maintain the speed of the team? How do I keep moving forward? And I think this is really where our values come in, and are we energized by what we do? And it doesn't mean that we have to be energized about the overall mission of what we're doing. It's what is there in your role that you can be passionate about. So I might not necessarily agree with a direction, right? Like maybe I got moved on to a new interstate, and maybe that's not the interstate I really wanted to be on, but I'm really passionate about my team. I'm passionate about mentoring my younger individual contributors so that they can take their place in the middle lane or in the leadership lane. So what can we be passionate about that can help us show up to work every day and be interested and be excited? Because all of us, I would assume, in our career have worked with at least one leader that just really didn't want to be there, that really didn't care, that just for whatever reason was stalled and didn't have that passion, didn't have that fuel moving them forward. And that can have a tremendous impact on the culture of the team and the impact that the whole team can have. So once we've got our oxygen mask on, we've taken care of ourselves, now we're really leaning in on our purpose and our passion, and we're focused on that. Then I think the next step is really around change, adoption, and that really is acceptance over agreement. And I think this is one, like when we talk about getting really practical, I think this is a really important strategy that middle managers need to have. Because if I'm having a change brought into the organization that I don't agree with, well, right, we're humans, okay, which means that in our raw, stressful state, we're all 12-year-olds, I can be honest, and we want to cross our arms and we want to stomp our feet and say, nope, we're not doing it. And so right now in Vermont, we have had a very liberal hybrid work schedule. And we are instituting a new policy December 1st where folks are coming back to in-office work 3 days a week. And that's a big change for my agency. We were already in once a week. But that's a really big change for some folks. And some of it just depends on how flexible your schedule is, right? So when you're introducing, and this is just one change, it could be any change. It could be, there's elections that are coming up and what's going to happen. And now a new governor is going to come in, or a new secretary is coming in, or a new supervisor or manager is coming in. And we all lament about the good old days, even when we didn't like the good old days and we were in the good old days and we were complaining about the good old days when they were the current days. Suddenly the past seems so much easier, and wasn't it wonderful when, because we don't agree with some of the changes, and we don't have to agree. In fact, if we disagree and we continue to rail against the change, we don't really give any space for our team to transition either, because we spend all day kind of talking about why this is a terrible idea and how we should be doing this. And so I really think that this is such a great emotional support to realize, okay, I don't necessarily have to agree. Now, if you don't agree to the point where it's going against your values, well, that's a different conversation, right? I think you can't lead with any kind of purpose and passion when, somebody's asking you to do something illegal or that's just morally apprehensive to you. That's when I think we need to think about transitioning. But assuming those are not the case, then how do we look at these changes? How do we drive in this middle lane in, gale force winds, so to speak, and hold that wheel steady when we don't necessarily agree? And I think a lot of it has to do with thinking about what can I agree on? Like, are there any pieces and parts of this that I can see some value in? And maybe that's challenging ourselves to look a little deeper. What could be a benefit? Having those conversations, and how do you support your team? And so there's this, I should have looked up the research on this. I don't have it to quote, but there's this article I read once that talked about going out for happy hour with your coworkers. And remember before COVID, when we used to do that, we'd all, go out for a snack or a cocktail or whatever you do. You'd get together, or, walking around our buildings. Remember the smokers were the cool kids when they used to walk, and then all that got decided that wasn't healthy. So then we take our walking breaks. And there's a narrow window in which we can kind of grouse and share about our frustrations. And it can be really helpful to just kind of get that out. But there's a long diminishing return when it gets past. And I think the article was talking about 15 to 30 minutes. Once we're past about that 15 to 30 minute window, then it actually is draining. It takes the whole rest of the group down. And so that's what I want to challenge us when we're in that middle lane. How much grousing and complaining and frustration helps the team air out the realities, because that's good, right? But then when do we take that too far? And I think that's where we really need to read the room. We need to see what the energy level is of the people around us. So you don't have to agree in order to accept the change. You can continue to move forward.
So I've heard of something called paradox work, and it's a phrase that's come up kind of with COVID and then after COVID, and it talks a lot about the contradictions in work and the contrariness that we see in work. And when you said you were going to talk about resilience and leadership, and specifically looking at middle management, that popped into my head, because I'm thinking, gosh, I mean, if I think back to when I was an HR supervisor, and I was in the middle, I felt like I was in a constant state of paradox because I had the orders coming in from above, and sometimes it felt like they had the flavor of the month that I was trying to meet that, so do I even start on a project because they're going to change their mind in through 30 days? And then I had the team that I was working with, and, they were saying, wait, we need more resources, or you got to give us more time. It's not realistic to think we're going to get this done in 20 days or whatever the timelines were. And I think there's a lot to be said in what you were just talking about of that. I really like that idea of acceptance over agreement and having that passion and purpose. And at the same time, how do you make that work when you're stuck in the middle of this paradox work situation?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's about balance. We have an obligation to our leadership to share the realities from our experience, right? Like, I don't think we do anybody any favors, just sitting quietly, yes sir, yes ma'am, no sir, no ma'am. Like, I don't think any of us really want to create that environment for our teams, and we don't want that environment created for us. And so I think that when we handle change and we're able to manage our emotions and not slide into our 12-year-old selves, which happens, and then we catch ourselves and we pull ourselves back up and we put our big girl pants on and we, really think about how to effectively communicate. I think we have the obligation to communicate the potential risks of a change and the potential impact of a change. But from there, then I think, okay, this is going to happen. How do I help people move through? And I have to do that by helping myself move through. I can't pretend with my team to be, I can't pretend and not be authentic that I may be struggling too. But maybe that's the biggest gift I give to my team. Maybe that is a gift that I can acknowledge, hey, I'm struggling too. Here's how I'm getting through. And maybe we can look at it from this lens, or we can reframe it for this. And not everybody moves through change at the same rate. But at least if we're leading with integrity and with transparency, and we're sharing that we are struggling and when we're struggling, and we're also still moving forward, we're keeping those wheels turning and we're making progress, change always looks so different from the rearview mirror, doesn't it? We think it's going to be the end of the world and the sky is falling and we're never going to be able to adapt to a new role, a new leader, a new legislative mandate. Name it, right? And somehow we make it through and, 6 months later, we're like, why was I so upset about that? Like, wow, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. So things become normal, and that's good because guess what? The next change is right around the corner because they never stop.
Well, and to your point, then we look back and say, well, 5 years ago it was so great.
That was so great. That's right. We lament about the good old days in which we were freaking out that we weren't going to be able to transition.
It can still be painful. I just have to say,
oh, yes.
You can move on, and rear view, you can be like, okay, I survived that, but that doesn't mean that I feel any better about it.
Yeah, that's fair too.
I still have PTSD from some of the things that happened with, COVID or software choices or, whatever it is. Like, some of those things are going to be painful forever, and that's okay too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the PTSD is real. It's really real. And just wait for the next system implementation that needs to happen. And people go right back there. I know in Vermont, we have had some pretty catastrophic flooding over the last few years. And we had the first really bad catastrophic flood. When the next flood came, it was so interesting to see how quickly people escalated. Because they're like, oh, I've been here before. I remember what this was like, and it was horrible. And so, boom, 0 to 60. And so I think that's a great point, Trish. I think just remembering that in a repeat trauma, you can escalate really quickly, and your teams can escalate really quickly. And we don't know with new team members what some of their challenges have been. I just think this is where effective communication is so important. And I think this is a great transition into our next to last point, which is around creating psychological safety. And we do that with our teams and our leaders, again, because, right, we're influencing the right side of the house, the left side of the house, and we're in the middle. We're influencing everybody around us, our peers, asking open-ended questions and really staying curious. When somebody is approaching you and they're at level 10, when you were anticipating a level 3, just acknowledging where they are and asking questions and trying to explore and uncover, it can be really important. And it's kind of a spinoff, really, of the point before, which is, acceptance over agreement. You can be supportive and you can show empathy without agreement. Mm-hmm. I don't have to agree with somebody's behavior or the way that they've just approached me, but I can try to understand why. Try to seek when somebody's stuck in a change. Why are they stuck? What's happening? And people will lavishly give you an explanation if you just ask the right questions, right? And that's the magic and the secret to helping somebody transition through change, is to understand why they're stuck in the first place. What is this experience that they're having? Why are they having PTSD? Why are they having a really, really strong reaction to something that you might have mistakenly thought was no big deal, mm-hmm. and it's a really big deal. And instead of trying to convince them that it's not a big deal, maybe just sit and listen and ask questions, because they're going to give you the answer to what it is that they need in order to transition if you sit there with them in the intensity of their emotion and try to figure out what's going on. The same with leadership, right? Like if they're coming in really strong on something, what is the real purpose? Like, mm-hmm. what's the real goal that we're actually trying to accomplish? Why is this so important? Why is the change happening? And, not in, again, our 12-year-old self or our 2-year-old self of, well, why? Well, why? Well, why? Well, why? But just getting creative and having these conversations by asking, what barrier do you see to a successful implementation? What are you most excited about in this implementation? What are you hoping to accomplish? What are you hoping our organization is going to accomplish? When we can sit ourselves in the research role, right? To understand, why are they constructing this idea? What is it that they're hoping to accomplish? What are they trying to achieve? What are they resisting? What is most impactful to them? Then I think in your earlier point about you like to see all the lanes, mm-hmm. you like to see what's going on. Well, then you have a more wide landscape. You can kind of see, okay, so this is the real reason we're doing this. And so maybe there are creative ways to achieve that result that aren't as negatively impactful on the people around us. So, like paying attention in transportation to people's direction lights, to their brake lights, when they're looking in their side mirrors. That's mm-hmm. something I learned as a motorcyclist. I don't wait for people to change lanes. I'm looking at their body language. I'm trying to pick up the cues, because people have some very consistent behaviors before they change a lane. They start looking in their rearview mirror. They're mm-hmm. looking around. And so picking up on those natural cues can help keep you safe. I think that's the same in change. When we see these cues coming up that things are afoot and change is afoot, starting to be open about that and having your leaders understand you're not going to be the person stomping your foot. Mm-hmm. You're going to be the person saying, oh, tell me more about that. Let's talk strategy. Let's talk about how to effectively make that change instead of railing against the change. Really positions us to influence the change. Maybe we can redirect that change just a little bit, redirect that lane just a little bit, and that is such an incredible impact to our people, and to be able to explain the why. So
back to that piece that you said about like people being able to speak up and ask questions at every level. You mentioned something about how everyone has some value, things that they can see from their lane that maybe you can't see from the left lane, And so giving them that space for their brain to be human and ask whatever those questions are from a generative standpoint can still give you, it's not necessarily people railing against the change.
Right.
It's giving them the why, giving them the reasons, and then maybe learning something from what they see from their lane that you couldn't see before, right?
Yeah. I mean, 1,000% in transportation, right? Like we all, in our vehicles, we have blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we have blind spot mirrors. And the people around us can be our blind spot mirrors, right? Like they can warn us about things that we aren't seeing. And that's going to create the safest journey or the most effective strategy for everybody. Yeah, absolutely. So last point, and so just to rewind, how are we doing? Is your oxygen mask on? How's your purpose and passion? Are you staying focused on that? Acceptance over agreement. Don't have to agree in order to keep moving forward. How are we doing creating psychological safety for our team and for ourselves, really? And then the final point is around having a growth mindset. And I know that's a very common term, growth mindset, but it's so important when we're in the middle of a change. So what can we learn from this? What can we learn about our relationships with our leaders, right? Like, what can we learn about the way that they communicate? What can we learn about our staff? What's really important to them? What are their values? What is their purpose? What is their passion? How do we help them with acceptance? What can we take in this situation? If you've worked your way through all the steps and you still kind of like want to stamp your foot and go, nope, I'm not doing this. I don't want to do this. This isn't right. Like, what part of it could create a positive outcome for you? What could you learn from it? And I'll tell you, this can go in a lot of different directions. That's why I really wanted to end on this point. This may sound funny / weird / different, but one of the things that I think is a guiding principle for myself is that I can learn nothing else. I can learn to control my own behavior and my own self-talk. And that's tough because I might find myself in a change I completely disagree with. Nope, there's just nothing good that's going to come out of this. And or I really just, I'm in a conflict with somebody at work and I just cannot see their point of view. Maybe the best thing I can do in this moment is to practice emotional intelligence. And can I sit and leave space for somebody that I really don't like, or I really don't, which is usually is code for I really don't understand. It isn't that I don't like them, it's that I don't understand them. And so maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just learning to listen more, or maybe it's learning to be able to detach a little bit and to not be obsessed at night when I go home from work, reeling in my mind about some conversation that I had or some change that's coming or something that was really hard. Maybe it's a way to just create some healthier boundaries, or to have a new tool where I go home and I have to just sit with something and relax and let it go and park it at the door and compartmentalize. And in small ways, not like as a life lesson, but in small ways, these are really healthy habits, and they can carry you through things that are far beyond and more important than what we do for a living, like how we engage with our families, or how we engage with our health, or how we engage with our finances. I mean, there are lots of really important life lessons that can be learned from saying, I don't really like where I am in this, but that doesn't mean that I need to fall apart as a human. I can still find joy, I can still find some clarity, and I can still find some purpose in my life, even when I may not like the circumstance or the situation or the project or the system, or, this is where you're like riding out the speed bumps, and you're riding out the potholes, and you're riding out construction zones in work, right? Like, maybe we can look at this from a growth mindset of a construction zone, and what can we build that's positive and healthy from it? So those are the points that I wanted to share today in the middle lane when we're, rocking the steering wheel and there's a lot going on. How do we take care of ourselves? How do we lead with passion and purpose? It's okay that we don't agree. How do we still move forward? How do we create psychological safety for ourselves and others? And how do we grow from it? How do we take this experience, whether it's beautiful or painful, and make something of value out of it?
Yeah, I'm so glad that we have the expert here because
this is a lifelong journey to learn to adopt. And yeah, we'd love to hear from listeners. What did we miss? What's a tool or a strategy that they're using that we can learn from?
Absolutely. And I think back to, I had one commissioner who I can remember clearly. There was a team of the executive leadership team was meeting, and there was a huge change coming down from the governor's office, and people in the room, to your point, it was that 15 to 30 minute window of, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening to us. And why, how are we going to make this work? Or, well, we weren't there yet. It was more of the, why should we even try to make this work? And then one of the deputy commissioners stood up and said, he said, change is coming. Change is always coming, but we all have a choice, and we can choose to understand the change and find a way to fit in or make it work for us. Or we can sit back and wait and let the change happen to us. Which do you want? And when you were talking today, that reminded me, it's like, these are really solid, actionable ideas that can help us make our choice, whatever our choice may be.
That's right. And and saying no and walking away is a choice. Mm-hmm. And it's a really valid choice. But if we're in, then we're in.
I've been at a previous job where I ethically disagreed with a change and ultimately ended up leaving that job, found another one first and whatnot, but.
Right, as you should to live by your values. There's nothing more important than that. Yeah.
And I really do think middle managers are stuck in the middle. I think there's a reason they're called middle managers, and that's because they are stuck between executive leadership, who's expecting them to execute strategy, and the traveling public and the workforce, who are expecting them to lead them in a healthy employee experience and a healthy travel experience. And that may be in direct contradiction with what executive leadership is expecting. And how do you, when you're stuck in the middle, being the liaison between operation and strategy, how do you make that work on a regular basis? And I think you've got 5 steps here that could really help somebody do that.
Yeah, I mean, I really do hope that people take to heart, because we can all listen to a podcast and get jazzed up, and that's great. But what are we actually going to do, right? Like, what are we actually going to execute on, and what can we put for tools in our toolbox that will help us to get through?
Yeah. Very cool. All right, so thank you for sharing that. It was great to hear. I've got my I've taken notes, and I've got my brain is going. But we're ready to move on to the coin toss. Are we ready for the coin toss?
Da, 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 da.
Yeah. So, in the coin toss, this is our highly scientific way of choosing your fate for the next step.
All right, I'm ready.
So we have here the coin. Yes. So this coin is from the Northwest chapter of the American Association of Airport Executives. I got it at an aviation conference a year ago, and it's from Salt Lake City Airport. And we're going to flip the coin. So the front of the coin has the logo for the AAAE, and then the back are all of the states that are in the Northwest chapter. Oh. So tails is the states.
Okay.
Head is the logo of the association.
Okay.
And if it comes up as a head, we have one question for you. But if it comes up for tails, we have a second question for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. We're going to flip it. Oop, and it rolls. And it's tails.
Tails. Well, this is perfect, because we were talking about leadership and leading heads. So now we're going to take a reverse direction and go into tails.
So our heads theme is kind of wisdom, but our tails theme is kind of nostalgia.
Um,
So here we go, Christine.
Nostalgia. Okay.
What was your first big ambition?
First big ambition. Well, before we do my ambition, I want to just share a little story about the big dream. So I mentioned earlier in the podcast that I came from a big family. And so I remember, I don't know why we did this. I was asking my nieces and nephews what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I think they were 4 to 7 or 8 years old. And so their answers were a chicken farmer. I don't know why. I grew up on a farm, but none of us ever raised chickens. One wanted to be a gas station attendant. So, and neither of them were chicken farmers or gas station attendants. I think they went into like accounting and electrical. So for my big audacious goal when I was younger, I wasn't very big and audacious. I wanted to be an adult. That's the first goal that I remember. And I think it's really interesting. And I think it's telling for how my brain works because it translates really well to workforce planning. I'm like really practical and I'm not trying to like jump over the moon. I just want to take the next step. So that's kind of like how my brain works. So like when I was a kid, I wanted to be an adult. And then when I was an adult, like I wanted to get married. Then I wanted to like, I remember as a professional wanting to have an office. So I find it ironic and all of my career and driving in every lane, I'm in a cubicle now. Because of COVID, because of teleworking, I'm in a cubicle. So yeah, so I would just say that I'm always really interested in like, okay, what's the next thing and the next thing? And in workforce planning, that's kind of what we're in the middle of writing our next workforce plan, and we're laying out our workforce pressures for our managers to kind of vote on and try to create some excitement and accountability in that. And so I'm just really interested to see what they're going to pick as their strategies and how I can weave the science and research in there to kind of help them realize their goals. So yeah, that's what I would say. For me, it's the next thing.
So we know that there are amazing and innovative things that are happening around the world with transportation. And so one of the things we like to do with our guests is find out, have you ever heard of this particularly wild thing? Or what do you think of it? Or maybe you have one to add, if you can build on the idea. So what we're going to show you is a picture, and it is a form of transportation maintenance in the country of Belize. And in the country of Belize, they actually have a unique way to fill in potholes. And the way they fill in potholes is on the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows that they take coconuts.
Wow.
And fill in their potholes.
Something I've never seen.
Right?
So before I comment, do I win a trip to Belize? I've never been to Belize, and I would love to go to Belize.
Me too. So
just for the context of the audience, I am from Vermont, and we received our first snowfall last night. So I am definitely dreaming today of tropical islands and coconuts. But that's really ingenious, right? And what are they doing? They're taking what they have, they're utilizing their resources creatively, and they're thinking outside the box. And so I think that's a pretty genius approach. It's probably a semi-unlimited resource on their island. Mm-hmm. But I still would like to go to Belize. So if anybody has an interest in going to Belize, I'm on board. I'm up for it.
We could do a follow-up.
Yes.
A follow-up podcast.
Yeah, in Belize.
And we could get coconuts.
In real life. We could have a live
video. I really think that we need to contribute to this. To me, part of the cool thing of this is that it's a community activity. Like everybody, they see the pothole, they grab a coconut and start filling it as they go, right? Like I think that we need to contribute to the pothole filling. So
coconuts. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And frilly drinks. by the
Mhm.
beach. Yes, in the sun.
Yes.
Well, and when I look at this and
Love it.
I try to tie it back to, what you've been talking
Mhm.
about today, this to me is part of those 5 steps,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely.
Somebody saw a need and they had to change the circumstances of the road.
Yeah.
They took what they had
Yeah. Yeah.
and created a solution. And I think that for me, the kind of the underlying theme that I heard from you was even in uncertain times or really stressful times, there are some things we can do that'll help us find a solution.
Right. Absolutely.
It may not be the one we expect,
Right.
like
Right.
coconut shells filling
Yeah.
up a pothole, but absolutely.
Yeah. But you had to recognize the problem needed to be fixed instead of admiring the problem of the pothole.
Right.
Or complaining about the pothole.
Exactly.
Or ignoring the pothole.
Right. And then you had to do something to influence the change as opposed to waiting for the change to happen to you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great example. That's fun.
It's a great tie-in.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fun.
All right. Well, Christine, thank you so much for
Yeah.
taking the time to talk with us.
Such a pleasure.
And putting together, a really thoughtful and easy to digest approach to what's a really complex but super relevant problem that people are dealing with every day, multiple times a day. And I hope that folks can listen to the podcast and really see how they could take your lessons learned and your advice and shape it to help them
We can
and
do
make
this.
their lives a little bit easier.
We can do this.
Yeah.
We've got to get good at change because it's going to keep rolling.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
We'll see you in the next lane.
Sounds great. You'll see me in any lane.
I'll be looking for a really big RV. That's what I'm going to be looking for.
I mean, apparently she rides
With a really big
motorcycles
smile on her
too.
face,
Who
wearing
knows
something
where we're
really
gonna?
tall, that's me.
In the middle lane. We know
In the middle
Christine
lane.
driving
That's right.
too.
My favorite lane.